Demon's Souls. Hello fellow masochists, with the Elden Ring DLC on the way, my brain has been turned into a FromSoft swamp. I'm trying to get out of it, but it's a slow process. I can barely see the way out, and after a while, I get poisoned, slowly losing my resolve. Then I get slammed by a red phantom and get sent right into the middle of it again. So my only recourse is playing all the Souls games, starting with Demon's Souls, the first one. Reading discussion on the highly esteemed forum reddit.com, famous for its use of dog-walking interns, people either think it's the hardest Souls game or the easiest. I would say both are correct, it just depends whether you're lactose intolerant or not. Premise: King Alan of Boletaria starts using soul magic to raise his kingdom to prosperity. But magic in this world is a product of demons, so using magic makes you more demonic. And Alan's use of magic brought the colorless fog, and with it, the demons. It is very hard to leave the deep fog, but the Knight Valorfax managed to. And he told the world about the fog that has engulfed Boletaria, and that the demons eat human souls to gain power, and that a demon soul can grant a human unimaginable power. And so many warriors ventured through the fog, for the power of demon souls or to save Boletaria. You are one of them. Gameplay. Okay, what did I mean about lactose intolerance? Well, let's start at the beginning. The character creator. The hardest part in every Souls game is making a character that looks good. Give up, you can't. Instead, just skip to the starter classes. You have some options, but I chose the Frenchman, strangely called royalty in this game. He starts with a rapier and a pussy stick. You'll see why I call it that in a moment. Controlling the character feels good, right? Way better and faster than I was expecting. Familiar but worse. The timing on things are off, I feel like there's a slight delay between animations. Backstabs are incredibly inconsistent. I finished the game and I still don't know how to do them. And the forward light attack. It is worse here than in any other Souls game. I was constantly accidentally doing them, and they all suck dick and cock, and fucked up my rhythm. Other than that, the melee combat is good. Except the fact that enemies do a fuck ton of damage. Even the little bitchest of enemies will take a sizable chunk out of your health. To balance that out, you get a lot of grass. In real life, when you lose health, you must touch grass. In Demon's Souls, you must eat the grass. Miyazaki really was ahead of his time on this one. For the most part, it's really easy to get away from enemies and do a heal, and grinding up a stockpile of heals is easy, so the game is easy if you play like a coward. Except when you get staggered or one-shot from an attack you didn't expect. This gameplay recording was called Are You Fucking Kidding Me? I felt dodging wasn't quite as effective as the other Souls games, and blocking works well, but drains a lot of stamina. And you will be fighting in a lot of cramped corridors, and your weapon will bounce off walls. Let the final boss of level 5 demonstrate. Why would they put him there if he can't use the weapon? So meleeing comes with a lot of risk, but surely it makes up for it with the reward. No. Throughout my entire playthrough, I always felt like meleeing was weak. To be fair, I did spend most of my levels on endurance, because heavy armor is cool and I didn't want a fat roll. But meleeing felt like trying to pick up girls in a Toyota Aygo. You drive on up to them and before you even open your mouth they are laughing at you. I also felt like staggering enemies was inconsistent. So meleeing is high risk, unreliable and has low damage. Despite that, I wanted to man mode melee this game, but every time I tried, the game punished me for it. So even if melee is always the more fun way of playing, I turn to the pussy stick. Magic does a lot of damage. It was always at least twice what melee would do and there is next to no risk. Because enemies are stupid. They are very slow to realize that you're there and you can start shooting your blue bolts and kill them before they ever get to you. And if you use the Thief's Ring, then they're blind and are amnesiacs. And you can attack them, they will run to you, then stop and walk back to where they were. It's also easier to run away to a safe spot. The downside is other magic users, like Squidward from the Tower of Latria. Their magic does a lot of damage too, but they don't know how to dodge, so you have the advantage. Even just the basic blue bolt and fire spell trivialize most of the game, and with the fragrant ring, you can go slowly through a level with spells, stop somewhere safe, go do something in real life, and come back to a full mana bar. In this game, just using magic at all is cheesing the game. And magic turns arguably two of the hardest bosses into a complete joke. With a Flame Lurker, you get him stuck and then just shoot him until he dies. With the Man-Eaters, go into this corner and cast Poison Cloud and wait and occasionally cast a fireball to bring them down to you. And even if a Man-Eater decides to fly down to you, just cast spells at him and don't worry about it. Just make sure you don't do this. If you listen close, you can hear me die inside. Magic is strong, but bows are also really good. In general, enemies suck at dealing with ranged. And I would say Demon Souls is about changing up your strategies and using both ranged and melee depending on the situation. This game beats the whole melee-only Souls purist out of you, and makes you realize that, hey, maybe those ranged guys weren't just cowards that couldn't get good, but instead were smarter than you, and had a deeper appreciation for their time. Use magic, use bows, use Demon Souls for power, leave humanity behind and become a demon. That's right, cheesing makes thematic sense. I'll explain that in the story section. Another thing that was inconsistent is the lock-on. Sometimes it worked like I expected, sometimes it didn't. Like if I saw an enemy on the screen I would expect to be able to lock on, but wouldn't be able to because of distance or because of a small obstacle. Now let's talk about world tendency, and then we can finally talk about bosses and levels. I played the game entirely offline, so there was no purpose in becoming human. By default, you are a phantom, but if you use a Stone of Ephemeral Eyes or kill a demon, you become human and gain the health that's usually blocked off back. But I didn't want to be a human ever, because if you die in a world as a human, that world will approach a blackened state. A blackened state makes the world harder for you. It will spawn harder enemies, and the enemies that are already there will become harder. So every time you kill a boss and become human, you go back to the Nexus, climb up the long flight of stairs, and jump off. The best way to play the game is regular ritual Sudoku, which is tedious. Most of the ways to get white world tendency is only available online, except killing bosses. But bosses are a limited resource, so the only thing you can do is stay a phantom. Dying is already punishment enough, but making the level harder because I died as a human is a step too far. And you will be getting invaded as a human when you're online, which is also punishment enough. The world tendency system is interesting, but I think it's poorly thought out and even poorly explained. You have to read a guide to understand it, like most things. I should have probably read a guide to level up better. I dumped a lot of it into endurance because I think rolling has two states: fat rolling and fast rolling. And fat rolling sucks harder here than it has ever sucked. And magic damage has its own dedicated stat instead of just being merged with intelligence, which just leads to spending a lot more souls for less value. Okay, last thing, and probably the most tedious and annoying system. Inventory item burden. You have a maximum amount of weight you can have in your inventory. And that is infuriating when you're halfway through a level and you can't pick something up because your inventory is full. So you have to constantly go back to stockpile Thomas and dump your loot on him. And then when you come back for the item, it's gone. This system single-handedly makes this the worst Souls game. Upgrading weapons was also pretty tedious, because it needed a fuck ton of materials and weapon scaling felt pretty bad across the board. Gameplay good, but weighed down by annoying and tedious systems and the fact that melee, the most fun playstyle, is punished too severely. Bosses and levels. Bosses are easy, levels are hard. That is the general rule of the game. Like I said before, normal enemies do a lot of damage, and the weird timings on dodges and inaccurate hitboxes means I got hit a lot, and for almost every boss, you will have to run through the entire level to get back to him. Some areas are better than others in this regard. Like Boletaria feels the most like the FromSoft level design I'm familiar with, where you unlock shortcuts as you explore and then the path to the boss isn't that bad. That's especially true before the Phalanx boss. You just go through the path on the left and then turn a lever to open a gate, and at that point you have a straight path to the boss from the respawn point. The Phalanx is a cool boss because he himself is essentially harmless. He's just surrounded by shield slimes that are easy to kill alone, but they're a threat in a group. So you thin the herd before you can get to the boss, and this is what makes the boss design here different from other Souls games. Most of the bosses have a gimmick that you either have to or should take advantage of. An example of have to is the Tower Knight. His boss run sucks, by the way. It's a big long bridge with a dragon constantly spewing fire on it, and you have to go under it and fight with a group of 5 dogs. Now that's just sadistic. And then when you get up, you have to run through the fire again and then straight into the arms of a group of 4 archers and a strong knight. By the way, you can kill the dragon, but it's a really long and tedious process, and not really worth it. You just get some souls. And then the boss is pretty strong, but very slow. And he's surrounded by archers you have to go around and kill before you can fight him. The Tower Knight's gimmick that you have to take advantage of is that you have to tickle his feet. Tickle them enough and he falls down, and then you actually deal serious damage to his head. The Adjudicator is also like this, where you have to take advantage of the giant piece of metal sticking out of him, hit that enough and he lowers his head and you can do damage. Okay, two examples of should take advantage. The Fool's Idol and the Old Hero. Both of these have terrible boss runs. Terribly long, with annoying enemies that can one-shot you. The Squidwards in the Tower of Latria, to be specific, are the annoying enemy. But they are actually not that bad once you learn how to stagger them with melee. But I died a few times and world tendency got blackened, and so I got the red squids, which are harder to stagger. So I thieves ringed and ranged them to death. And doing that is tedious, but it's at least safe. And then the boss has a prerequisite. You have to kill this guy in the level or he will revive the boss, which is just annoying. But luckily I read the guide before I went in and never had to deal with that. But the Fool's Idol doesn't move, she just teleports and you can hide behind the pillars and then you will be safe from her magic. And then you can peek out and shoot her with your magic and slowly whittle her down safely and easily. Melee seems like a death wish with her, since you would get stuck on the pews around her. But easy. Old Hero. His boss run is excruciating. It starts with a Reaper that brings these souls to life, but that is actually the best soul farm in the game. Because you can shoot like 2 or 3 arrows for 5,000 souls, and it takes like 20 seconds. But the biggest tedium around that is that you have to return to the Nexus every time, which itself takes like 20 seconds. But moving on from that, you go outside and you have the Rolling Annoyance. These skeleton assholes that constantly get a hit in with their instantly damaging rolls. An archer roller, flying stingrays that are constantly shooting at you, and they are almost impossible to shoot with a bow and arrow, because FromSoft aiming with a bow sucks, and they're usually too far away to take any damage. Make it through that and 2 golden skellies block your path and they are tanky, and can one-shot you, and you have to kill them while the stingrays shoot at you. Make it through that and you have to deal with soul enemies that shoot lasers at you, and then find the Reaper tucked in a corner with a laser soul enemy. The Reaper can one-shot you, by the way, and takes a fair bit of damage before he goes down, and he constantly respawns the soul enemies. Make it through that and you just have to make it through this walkway area with holes in it and exploding balls of blue energy and slugs. And then you get to the Old Hero. The Old Hero is blind and can't see you, so you can just stand at the entrance and shoot him with arrows and he won't find you. You are cheating yourself out of a fun fight maybe, but after the ordeal of getting to him, do you really wanna risk it? This is also the case with the Flame Lurker. A really long path to him with exploding things. Like the extremely tanky bear bugs that block your path. They aren't really a threat, they're just extremely fat and block the tunnel. So you have to kill them to get past, and they explode when they die. I also got lost in these tunnels for like 15 minutes. After that, of course, you cheese him, because you don't want to deal with the run again. And I hate his spam AoE attacks. In general, I was fine with the Stonefang tunnels and that whole area. It was cool that the enemies are resistant to slashing attacks, and you have to change your strategy to get through it. But like anything else here, just use magic and you will be fine. Still kinda tedious to spend a minute killing the tanky enemies. The Man-Eater run is fine because at least you get a shortcut even if you have to deal with Squidwards and this nightmare fuel. And fighting one of the Man-Eaters would have been fine, but 2 of them on this cramped bridge is just evil. So of course I cheesed them. Kinda. I managed to split them up and then 1v1 fought each of them. The Valley of Defilement. Miyazaki's dream is to retire to a swamp in Ireland and constantly maintain it so that anyone that wants to go through the swamp has to wade through it slowly with water at hip height and die from frostbite, because poisoning a huge body of water is hopefully very illegal. The Valley of Defilement is actually the easiest area. Easy enemies and easy bosses. It's just annoying, because some enemies cause poison or plague and the swamp causes poisoning, and you can't roll in it. So fighting in it is an absolute no-go, because trying to dodge there will make you stuck in a stupid animation and be vulnerable to damage. You also can't see where you're going, but as you progress you can unlock a shortcut to skip the swamp, which is nice. And the boss here is a good ranged fight, but I found melee to be annoying. His melee attacks were tough for me to read, but I enjoyed the dodge and shoot style of fighting this guy. Same case for the armored spider. The final boss of every level except Boletaria is a complete joke. The Storm King. You just pick up the sword, go in the house and hit enemies when you can. It's a pretty boring fight, but a cool spectacle, and has no boss run, and I love that. The Dragon God is not fun. You have to break debris in your way and stop, so you don't get one shot by one of his hands, and dodge his other hand, which also one-shots you. Shoot him with a ballista, then you have to dodge fire breath, I think. I just ran and broke debris as fast as I could and activated the other ballista, so I didn't see. And at that point, just go down to him and hit him for free. Just don't fall off and die. It's an obstacle course, just throw yourself at it and eventually you will get it. No boss run. Maiden Astrea. Garl Vinland is the threat here, but like I showed before, he can't hit you most of the time, and he always returns back to that spot. If he followed you, he would be a threat, but since he wants to stay in that area, you just bait him to attack the wall and then hit him for free, or just shoot him with magic for free. Then he dies, you go in the swamp and get plagued, park yourself next to the maiden while you find your plague curing item, and then she dies after calling you a meanie. No boss run. Then the old monk. He is the most challenging of the not Boletaria final bosses, but still easy. It's an NPC fight, and the NPCs in this game are easy to deal with, especially when you're coming from the other games. But his boss run is a gauntlet, because it has those spider human things which are easy, but also 2 red Squidwards, which again take a lot of damage and are hard to stagger, but it can be done. I enjoyed the old monk. It was dodging and then hitting at the right time, and that's the fun I find in Souls games. The later half of Boletaria is nice. It's a normal area with no bullshit, and fairly challenging enemies, and the bosses are good. The Penetrator seemed like a fun fight, but I didn't kill him. Bior of the Twin Fangs did. Love that guy. Best guy. I was just the audience. It was just a WWE match, and I was a psychotic audience member occasionally throwing a chair into the ring. Then finally, False King Alant. His boss run was pretty good, especially after you kill the blue dragon, and I loved this boss fight. Strong telegraphed attacks meant to be dodged, and I fought him full melee straight up no cheese. And for once I didn't feel punished for it, and instead I just enjoyed it. His main issue was that he would get stuck spamming this super AoE, and the only way to stop him was to shoot fire at him. But after that we would get back into this artful fight of perfectly timed dodges and melee hits. Sometimes he would turn weirdly and hit me when usually I would have dodged that attack, but it didn't do that much damage, so it never pissed me off. It was a great fight and the most fun I had in the entire game. And I think that pretty much covers the gameplay. Story. Okay, I said I would explain how using magic to cheese makes thematic sense. Magic is a product of demons in this world, and magic is really strong. It's temptation. The demons are tempting you with power. Turn to the dark side and you will have an easier time with the game. So being full melee and using a bow for ranged is the objectively morally correct thing to do in this world, since using magic empowers the demons and not using it and killing demons without it weakens them. And hey, that's a pretty cool way of integrating gameplay mechanics into the story. But using magic has no effect on world tendency or anything, so whatever. Putting our media literacy hats on, you can obviously say, oh yeah, magic being strong and coming from the demons means power corrupts. And King Alan is an example of greed being bad. But then they twist that actually and make it more interesting than that, which I will talk about in the spoiler section. The vibe or the atmosphere of Demon Souls is like no other. The Souls games are all set in some apocalypse. In Dark Souls, it's a world slowly dying. In Demon Souls, it's a world getting murdered. It's a world infested with horrific and annoying demons that are out to get you, and only the worst humans remain. The most evil and the most desperate. The annoyances and oppressiveness of the gameplay complement the story really well, because they sell that this world is in a terrible state, where all that remains are tormentors and a few victims who manage to survive. But I'm gonna have to go spoiler mode to talk about that stuff, so let's talk voice acting and cutscenes. The cutscenes are decent. They don't really do much except exposition dump and show some relevant images, but decent. The voice acting, however, is good and sells the emotion, but mouths of characters don't move. The characters don't move at all. That's pretty lame, but the voice acting makes up for it. Plus, I have to pay close attention to what is being said so I can keep track of all this stuff. So I'm not that bothered by the lack of movement. The biggest issue I have really is the lack of story. It's mostly just background for what happened to make this place like it is, and where some characters and bosses came from, and when I kill the final boss of a level and return to the Nexus, there is no new dialogue or story thing. There is no acknowledgement that you killed the boss, except in Boletaria. Seriously, I killed the final boss in a level and there's nothing. No new dialogue or cutscene, nothing. The only two I can think of are the last two bosses of Boletaria. For everything else, it's as if nothing changed in the world. Even if you just killed the fucking dragon god. The story is pretty straightforward, just evil demon fog came, you have to kill demons to stop it. And occasionally you talk to characters and they give you a history lesson with your grandpa, which I was always interested in. I always wanted to learn more about the world. I'm just disappointed there wasn't more to learn. But in this world they created here, I don't think there really was more to tell. It's too straightforward. And it has to kind of feel empty, because almost everyone is dead. Despite the lack of story in some respects, I feel like the story that is here and the atmosphere of the game is the most redeeming part. And unfortunately those parts are the hardest to articulate. But I will try. The atmosphere of Demon Souls kept me on edge and uncomfortable, So I always played scared because I always felt like something was gonna jump at me. It feels more like a horror game than any other Souls game. The best example of that is just how dark everything is. It really sells that this is a land engulfed by demons, drowned in evil, and you are here alone fighting back. You are a force of good striking down pure evil, and the evil that is here tickles the morbid curiosity part of your brain. Let's move on to spoilers. Skip to the conclusion if for some strange reason you care about being spoiled. Spoilers. At the end of the game you face the real King Alant, and he tells you that the reason the world is in complete shit is because King Alant is the most reprehensible thing a human could possibly be. A nihilist. He wants the old god demon to consume the world because the world is just full of suffering, and because of that, it's pointless. The life lesson from King Alant is this: if life is hard, just give up. With King Alant throwing the world into demon anarchy, he surrounded himself with the greedy and the sadistic. This is most easily seen with the fat officials. Them being fat shows their greed, but you see their sadism when you rescue Yuria. She came to this land with purpose, but she was captured and held prisoner by the fat officials. And they tortured her, and possibly worse. So much so that when you rescue her, she has completely given up any reason she had for coming here, and just wants to help you, but warns you that her magic is evil. Her magic is the reason the fat officials captured her. She will sell you her magic, but doesn't want you to use the magic that brought her nothing but trouble. It's very depressing, and most storylines are depressing in this game. But Stockpile Thomas's story is a little more hopeful. When the demons and the fog came, Stockpile Thomas ran and ended up in the Nexus, abandoning his family. And at the gates of Boletaria, you can find the bodies of his family hanging at the gates. From the corpses, you can get his daughter's hairpin and bring it to him. And he will be sad that she died and call you a saint for giving him the hairpin. He will later talk about how much he regrets or questions why he didn't just fight and protect his family. But he doesn't fall into despair. He tells you that you carry the hopes of everyone in the Nexus. He doesn't despair because of you. He believes in you, that you will save everyone here. He still has hope because you are out there fighting, killing the demons and bringing people like Yuria, Sage Freak, and Saint Urbane back to the Nexus. You carry his hopes, and with that you save the land by killing the greatest demons and letting the Maiden in Black go to sleep with the old demon worm thing or something. And in return, Stockpile Thomas carries your 30 shards of Heartstone and various useless armors. The game also has patches. Killing him always feels good. Every level in the game will display evil and cruelty. The Tower of Latria is just a gauntlet of medieval torture devices, and a reference to the King in Yellow at the end. Okay, the game is just Berserk and you are Guts. Conclusion. I started the game by fighting the Vanguard melee straight up no cheese. And that's what I wanted to do for the game, and what I felt was right. But then, as the game progressively became more annoying and frustrating, I turned to cheese to get through it. Always feeling like it was wrong, but felt forced to because of the oppressive nature of the game. But in the end I faced false King Alant, melee straight up no cheese. because I felt like that was the right thing to do. And I didn't want to let the game change that. It's a game that constantly tries to push you into cheesing, to break down your resolve to be a man fighter and turn you into a cheese man. And for that reason, this line from Stockpile Thomas will stick with me.
You have a heart of gold. Don't let them take it from you.
Don't let Demon Souls turn you into a cheese person. It's a very frustrating game and it isn't very polished and the worst Souls game mechanically. Like I would get stuck when trying to get upstairs and I've already talked about the combat and its shortcomings. I would not recommend this game for the gameplay, but I would recommend it for the story and atmosphere. The atmosphere carries the game. It's a very interesting world. The physics are also very fun. Don't play this game unless you can tolerate or like the annoying parts of Souls games. Instead of playing, watch Varys videos about it or the Brothers Code video about it. It's very good. I give the game...
Brother,
out of... I wanted this video to be shorter and more concise, but I couldn't help myself. I wanted to keep talking about it. I love these games even at their worst, which Demon Souls is. It's the worst one. The least fun one. To me at least. But every single one of the FromSoft Souls games is good. This is just the least good. Now I can move on to Dark Souls 1, expect that in like 2 to 3 weeks. If everything goes well. Until then, subscribe, thank you for watching and have a decent day.